She was wishing me a rather belated happy birthday. She actually sent me a package with all sorts of family-friendly goodness, including one thing that I want to share here. She went up to Alaska recently, right? And apparently they have this thing up in Alaska called salmon. Like lots and lots of salmon. So she sent me several things of salmon, including something I didn't know actually existed. Salmon jerky. Apparently smoked with cherry wood and alder with no preservatives. I'm going to go ahead and try a little bit of it right now live on camera. Except I don't actually have a camera. Yeah, I'm 100% serious. I told you salmon was involved here. I got a little base here. Ooh, that's good. Yeah, salmon jerky. It's right here. That's actually really good. Apparently wild king salmon specifically. Ingredients: wild salmon, salt, brown sugar, soy sauce, corn syrup solids, natural flavoring, spices, garlic powder. There you go, salmon jerky. All right, so back to FF6. I know I was talking about Strago. There's one other thing I want to talk about at this point in time. This is a unique thing what they do with this dungeon. First of all, it's an incredibly linear dungeon, but it's kind of supposed to be. Like, it's not supposed to be a typical dungeon, if you follow. There's basically, at its two junctions, you get two paths. One of them is the wrong path. Well, this isn't actually 100% true, but basically, occasionally you'll be like, oh my god, and pushed back, and you'll have to fight some fire enemies, and then the rest of the time you'll be fine. But a couple of lore tidbits here I want to point out. First of all, they actually have a lore explanation for why this house is burning so badly. It's because they keep all these fire rods stored in here. And, you know, so the fire rods keep burning and blah, blah, blah. There's actually a second reason, though. And this is related to something that they've already established. So this is another example, if I could switch back to more review than lore run mode for a moment. This is another example of some really good writing technique, because they establish a concept, and then so that the viewer, the audience, has that idea in their mind to some extent or another, so that later on when they bring it up again, it's not out of nowhere. They're like, oh, aha. In other words, they already brought up the idea of the southern continent having magical creatures on it, of the magically inclined creatures that were actually in the Esper Cave, you know, because there was magic seeping out of the area. So what we see here is, both from the rods and from the people who live here, the magic has been seeping into this area and creates these kind of creatures, these living flame elementals and whatnot, who therefore are magically inclined and are thus magically perpetuating this fire, rather than this just being a mundane fire. Make sense? So that's cool. Second point here. So that's actually good writing. I think that deserves a story plus for the good writing, which means story has finally started the overlap there. I think we actually have more. We might actually have more gameplay pluses than story pluses. Isn't that funny? Second of all, the graphics of this section are fantastic. I think this is going to get another graphics plus, because it really, I mean, this scene would probably look fantastic in full 3D awesome, but even just on the sprites, they really get across the idea that this is an inferno. I mean, there aren't even walls here. Everything is on fire. It is this constant flaming, burning mess. And I've always had that impression, that pseudo claustrophobia feeling. And yeah, the ripple really helps add to it. So yeah, I think this definitely gets a plus for graphics, as I drop the controller yet again. There we go. But then there's the audio thing. Now, someone in chat mentioned it earlier when I first picked up the phone, about the fact that there's no music here. Now, I don't think this gets a full plus, because they kind of flubbed it. Anyone out there played Twilight Princess? Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess? There's a scene where you have to get Midna, because that's her name, damn it, I don't care what you say, to a certain location, and they have to do so, and this wonderful theme is playing while you're doing it, to really emphasize the emotion and strength of the scene. And then every now and again, the battle theme just interrupts it. And that scene would literally be perfect. Like, I wouldn't change anything about how they did that section of the gameplay, except for the fact that they need to get rid of that frickin' combat music, right? If they, so this is a similar situation. The absence of music here, instead all you hear, I don't know if you know if you can hear it on the stream, it's really quiet. There's just this dull roar of the fire, no music. And it's perfect. It really adds to the atmosphere of that cloistered, claustrophobic feeling of walking through the inferno. Between the flames and the wavy effects and the lack of music and the roar, it's just like, oh god. And then you go into a battle and the battle music ruins it. This would have been much better if it had just stayed quiet for this whole section. So I don't think this gets a plus for sound or music because it's still got an issue, but it absolutely gets a plus for the graphics because this just looks incredible. You know what, screw it. It gets a plus for the music sound because doing the non-audio thing does actually work really well. And I agree, by the way, doing a Fog of War would have been great. Imagine if you go out here and like I couldn't see that doorway on the right there. Yeah, see here, the battle music just kind of ruins it. That is true, Kay. Oh, someone asked me what weapon Locke had equipped. I'll look in a moment. Assuming you're still there. The Assassin, that's what I figured. It's one of those instant death proc weapons. There's a couple daggers like that. But yeah, Aerith thing, they absolutely, yeah, the fight with Genova, whichever one it was, that was awesome. Zanarkand, they did that right there. They've done that before, and they've done it correctly before, so it's not like it's an unusuality. He's got enough mana for this. Excuse me, let me make this clear. Squaresoft has done that correctly. Genova Life, thank you. I knew it was one of them. I thought it was actually Genova Death, given the scene, but I apparently was wrong. Genova Life, which is even more ironic. Okay, so, boss time. Here we encounter the magical nexus of the, the infusion of fire into magic here. The Flame Eater. I would have probably kept the boss music here, by the way, and just left it out of the entire rest of the section. That's just how I would have done it. I don't know if that's like correct or whatever. That's right. Death was all the way up there. Wow, he's immune to bio. So he hurts like hell, by the way, because he knows level 2 spells, and I'm still really low level. I know that probably sounds weird, but it's true. I'm actually pretty damn low level right now. Why am I? I will remain low level, and I might actually have some very serious difficulties getting through the floating continent at sub 20. We'll see. Yeah, I know Fire 2 on him now. And Locke is dead. Let's talk about one other thing. This is actually a good time to talk about it, even though I should have talked about it way at the beginning of the game, but I mean, at the beginning of the game I always have so much to talk about. Bosses do not give experience at Final Fantasy VI. Now, for those of you not fully aware of what I mean by this, across RPGs in general, bosses tend to follow slightly different rules than other enemies. In some cases, they give experience and magic and gold and items. In some cases, they only give like one of those things. In some cases, they give nothing. This is an example of them giving nothing. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. But yeah, they... bosses in FF6 give just... Oh, Jesus. Bosses in FF6 just give magic points, sometimes gold, and item drops as applicable. Those are always static on item drops, not random. Whether that's a good thing or not is going to depend on your opinion, but I'm going to go ahead and give my reasons why I think that's actually a bad thing. Hear me out here. Hang on a second, there we go. Oh crap, he's out of mana. Screw it. I'm going to have a billion elixirs by the end of the game anyways. It takes away, in my opinion... Really? Really, dude? It takes away, in my opinion, a lot of the motivation, feeling of accomplishment, and feeling of progression. When you defeat a boss and you've gone through all this stuff and it's like, aha, the boss is dead! And then you basically get nothing out of it. I mean, I know, you do get some things out of it, but the fact that you get so little progression from boss kills is an aggravation to me. And oh my god, die! Just die! Why are you still alive? You have like 3,500 HP. Hey, Chatter. And soon to be bye, Chatter. I may have to start actually paying attention. Okay, we're good. Jeez Louise, so after that big epic fight, here, you want to see what I get after the end of this? I get, drumroll please, 492 experience points? Okay, I'm not crazy, right? Because I swear to God, most bosses in FF6 do not give exp. Oh, no, they don't. I got that for killing the ads. That's what that is. Okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, guys. Whew! So anyways, I would have gotten the 3 MP and whatnot. Yeah, the X. Yeah, you're right, Nail. I'm like, why did I get experience from a boss? Have I been wrong for years? It wouldn't be the first time. Anyways, what do you guys think about this though? Legit, because this is a disagreement in terms of gameplay. Some people believe bosses should be their own thing, that they should be a separate, like a final quiz of whatever the combat engine is of any given particular game, and that you shouldn't actually be rewarded for defeating a boss. Some people think a boss should be more rewarding than trash, that you should get sufficient benefit from having successfully beaten a boss. FF6 is obviously an example of the former. Paper Mario is an example of the latter. You know, an average fight in Paper Mario is going to give you, say, 3% of a level. A boss fight is usually going to give you 30 to 60% of a level. Just right there. Bam, done. Or excuse me, there we go. Bam, done, level. And so I really, really like that idea of being able to be benefited from fighting a boss. That's my opinion. I'm not actually going to say it's right or wrong because, again, this is a difference in perspective. This is a difference in mentality when it comes to game design. But I really wish FF6 did actually have experience gain and better magic gain for beating the bosses. In fact, in my opinion, I think most of the bosses need to, if nothing else, give tons of MP. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, several bosses do give tons of MP. Yes, but not all of them. In fact, not even most of them. Just a few give like 10 MP, which isn't that much. Now, I agree with what Salmon King just said, by the way. We do not necessarily need a you do not necessarily need a gameplay reward for beating a boss. A story reward is acceptable too. Ideally, it should be both, because most of the best games will do both. You'll get rewarded with an extra cutscene, or you'll get rewarded with extra experience and whatnot, or rather, I should say both. So that way, people who care about the story get something, and people who care about the gameplay get something. Right? Make sense? But I do actually, and I was about to mention what Kay mentions in Kingdom Hearts 2, and I think in Birth by Sleep. Hey, Pandemonium, what's up, man? You also have that thing where you basically get a bonus for beating that boss, even if you didn't level, even if you didn't actually get like a ding, even if you hadn't finished, maxing out a drive or whatever form or whatever, just for beating that boss, you get a completely separate reward for beating that boss. Now it's static, but it's still a form of progression, and I like that idea. So I think, in the interest of total honesty, I think I'm going to put this as a negative for FF6, the fact that bosses don't reward you in FF6. Not really. Now, optional bosses are different. We're not talking about optionals. Optionals and super optionals really are a completely separate category, for all intents and purposes. We'll talk about optionals and super optionals later. There are a couple optionals in FF6. Until the GBA version, there actually is no super optional in FF6, which is a little bit of a shame. But we'll talk about that later. So, Strago has saved Realm. Excuse me, Shadow has saved Realm. In case you're not paying attention, by the way, what just happened is freaking brilliant. Okay, I'm going to lay this out for you in case you didn't catch this. The armed, skilled adventurers with magic at their back fought their way to the back of the place, defeated the enemies, and were incapable of dealing with the more mundane environmental difficulties that they were faced with. Shadow, the trained assassin who is good, skilled at infiltration and exfiltration and assassination, slipped in, defeated whatever was on them, and slipped right back out. It's a subtle point, but it helps to emphasize the fact that Shadow may not be on the same level as the party in terms of raw combat, but he is nonetheless very skilled, and there's a reason he is so well recommended when it comes to the lore aspect of things, of him being, the greatest bounty hunter slash assassin slash whatever in the world. And it's also, I've always liked that bounty hunter perspective. I'm one of those people who looks at Boba Fett or Cad Bane or the woman whose name I can't remember in the Tor era and thinks that is someone who is awesome. That is someone who can keep up with people who are stronger and more skilled and more powerful because they are so equipped and so experienced and know how to apply themselves properly, So I like that perspective on Shadow here. So here we find out a few tidbits about this. I've actually already talked about all this, so I'm just going to blaze through this conversation. Blah, 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 blah. Batman? Who the heck is that? Is that like Superman? Although, I will say, the best Superman stories tend to be the ones where he is being skilled in his application of power, rather than just steamrolling over his opposition. That's just my opinion. So, yeah. This line right here deserves some special mention. Why is it the people who have this magic are hiding in the corner of the world, trying to not interact with the rest of the world? Imagine what would have happened in a world where magic had nearly destroyed the world. Ruined cities, ruined people, thousands or millions or more dead and ruined and crushed, everyone's lives completely overheaved. People need scapegoats. People need a blame figure. And magic is the clearest and most obvious blame figure. So imagine all of those people who had used magicite and fought in the war or used it for their own purposes or whatever. All of them suddenly had one thing in common. They were hated by the world at large. The funny thing is, this emphasizes that bonds of human fellowship thing again in the same way it did with the Espers. In other words, the Espers, despite all their power, were still people, and they were still afraid of the rest of the world because the rest of the world wanted to use them. They either hated them or feared them or viewed them as little more than a resource. Same thing with the Magitech Knights of old. They were feared, hated, viewed as nothing but a resource. Imagine how many people back then would have tried to use the Magitech warriors for their own political gain, or for their own personal gain, or tried to force them into servitude, or force them to do things in order to further whatever their ends are, or hated them because their family had been killed during the war, or maybe, and you get where I'm going with this. The idea is, this is one of the reasons why I feel the War of the Magi would be a perfect prelude game, because there is a wealth of storytelling perspectives that can happen there, and the game doesn't even have to end when the war ends, because the world didn't get better when the war ended. The world was still a mess. There was still stuff to do. There was still stuff to fix. And there were still things that needed to happen, like what he's talking about here, with people being hunted down and murdered because they happened to be Magitech Knights. By the way, I know that most people don't agree with this idea of genetics being a thing, and admittedly I don't either, but I've always thought that the way they were going with this is Shadow, one of the most skilled, precise people in the game, really. His daughter is someone who could keep up with geared and skilled adventurers who have magicite at their back just by virtue of being herself. In other words, like daughter, like father, or like father, like daughter, I guess that would be. Oh, by the way, I also think Geralt qualifies as one of the skilled applied guys, because even when compared to other Witchers, Geralt is just a head and shoulders above the rest. That's just my perspective on it. Um, and again, it's the same thing I just said about Superman. Superman may have a ridiculously stupid amount of power, but it's the fact that he knows how to apply it that makes him more interesting, at least to me. So, does Strago recognize Shadow? Abso-frickin-lutely. I'm sorry, but really, there is no denying in my mind that Strago recognizes Shadow. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Strago is intelligent enough or wizened enough to recognize that the fact that Shadow hasn't said anything, and the fact that he's acting the way he has, and the fact that he basically just bailed one day on his hometown, means that Shadow is, in his own words, still running. And so you notice Strago never actually really confronts him over that. He just says thank you and moves on. Also, this is an interesting character point for Shadow. Shadow doesn't get many character points, so I'm pointing them out as we go. Shadow leaves here, doesn't break his contract, he's still looking for the Espers and whatnot, but he leaves here specifically because at this point he feels something, anything. We've already talked about this. He actually cares about Realm, obviously. He actually cannot take staring at that emotion like that. He can't take being around his daughter. It's too painful. After so many years of feeling nothing, or rather of trying to feel nothing, or pretending to feel nothing, of ignoring his emotions, he can't take this. So he's going to keep to his contract, because he's a professional, but he has to bail because he can't stand being around here anymore. Now, one of the things that I've always liked the idea of is that Shadow actually successfully found the Espers before we did, and then went back to report on it to the Empire, and that's when he ended up basically getting mixed up with the Imperial forces that ended up on the floating continent. I know that's a bit of a leap in logic, but it does actually make a degree of sense that Shadow, once he found the Espers, rather than coming back here to General Leo, would go all the way back to the people who actually hired him. It's flimsy. It could actually be considered a plot hole. But otherwise, the question becomes, how does Shadow get from here to the floating continent? And if anybody else has any ideas or theories, I'm absolutely open to hearing them. I'm curious what you think. Because, yeah, Shadow goes from Thamasa, and the next time we see him, we'll be on the floating continent without Interceptor, I feel like pointing out. Oh, I don't think he would trust the Empire at all, but he is a professional. So he would absolutely try to fulfill his contract. That's just my take on it, though. I really don't know. And like I said, I freely admit that is a flimsy explanation. We might actually have to put this as a negative for the story, because that does feel a little bit story conveniency. Because Shadow has to be on the floating continent in order to ensure that the statue situation goes the way it does, right? And I've said it before, and I've said it 1,000 times. Anytime a story thing happens for the sake of the story, without it making sense, that's bad writing. So I'm going to think on this a little bit more. And again, if anybody else has any thoughts, feel free to share. You are already set up, I think. Yes, you are. Yep. Okay. Good night, chatter. Have a good one, man. Okay. Also, don't forget that Interceptor is damaged here in Thamasa, whereas Shadow is on the floating continent. So, that's another little... Oh, I missed it, Bregman. Dick Fu? Was that your quip? Really? Really, Bregman? Yes, absolutely, Darth Pandemonium. In fact, I think it would work well if FF6 and most older FFs were done in stylized graphics rather than realistic graphics. That's just my take on it. But I mean, I want you to honestly try to picture some of the things that exist in older games and try to imagine them in full realistic tilt, and it just doesn't quite work, does it? At least in my opinion. Now, that being said, there is an argument against what I just said, which I will now posit. The Dissidia games. The Dissidia games are pseudo-realistic in style. I mean, they're not as advanced as, say, some of the more modern games, but the Dissidia games nevertheless managed to make Kefka and Terra look just fine. So, as I've said many times, the actual engine, in terms of graphics, that I would pick for proper remakes of some of the older games is the Dissidia one. Or the FF12 one is another good one. Not FF13. There's some issues with that one. And not the fact that it's FF13. But I've talked about this before many, many times. No! Sneeze is such a weird thing. It's like partially a positive. It means you cannot lose the battle no matter what, because one of your people is still alive. But it also means that person gets no benefit if you actually win the battle, so it's kind of a weird situation. If I'm not mistaken, that concept of doing like that kind of sneeze thing is almost brand new to the Final Fantasy series here in 6. The only one prior to this, yes, Formosan, the only one prior to this that does anything like that is one enemy in FF5, Atomos, who can eat people permanently, you know? That's the only thing example I could think of that, of a party being banished from, party member being banished from the combat, rather than just dead or downed or whatever. Where are we at on this? Hey, we need to see those pores, Kay. I'd make the joke about Lightning being a waifu again, but I think I've made that joke a lot of times lately, so we're just gonna say Lightning's a waifu and move on. Lightning, waifu. I'm just gonna start saying that. You guys can feel free to laugh or call me stupid. I don't care. Lightning waifu. I think the real distinction, Samurai, is the Kingdom Hearts series tends to go a little bit more towards the cell-shaded style, with a relative lack of texturization, as opposed to Dissidia, which focuses a little more on mesh. Oh, I like that idea, Leander. In fact, that is a perfectly acceptable answer to what's going on. Seriously, think about it. She... Damn it, really? In other words, break. Shadow probably was, doing his own thing, got caught up in the Imperial attack when it finally hit. Hey, Scorpion, you did it! That made me grin, man. I needed that. That was awesome. In other words, the idea here being that Shadow, went off, did his own thing, whatever, got caught up in the Imperial attack. Hello, Realm. And by about the point in time at which, the Imperial attack completed, Shadow was like, okay, this is bad. Interceptor was obviously wounded in the battle. That's how we see him. Shadow himself was like, this makes more sense the more I think about it. I really like that idea, Leander. I'm giving you full props for that idea. Everyone, Leander's awesome. Think about this, though, okay? You with me on this? Shadow has had nothing to... He's emotionally compromised right now, right? We've already talked about this. This is set in stone. Shadow is emotionally compromised. He can't be around Realm. He can't face her, but he still cares about her. He cannot deny the way he actually feels. That's his frickin' daughter, okay? And he does love her, and he does care about her. And so even as he's running, he can't bring himself to stay away, so he hides. This is Shadow we're talking about. It would be extremely easy for the gentleman to go ahead and hide on board the Blackjack in order to keep with the party and to keep an eye on Realm until ending up on the floating continent as a result of being caught up in the battle of, the battle that happens over the floating continent. You remember? I mean, we go through a whole battle sequence up there, and it's very easy to think of Shadow having been damaged or injured or otherwise attacked during that battle and literally falling down to the continent. And then Shadow sees the people show up, and it's like, oh, yes, I'm totally just, the Empire cut me in and blah, 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 And so therefore, Shadow ends up on the floating continent lying about it because he cares and doesn't want to admit it. The reason I love this, though, is this makes a perfect branching character element. This gives Shadow a reason to care about what happens at the statues, at the climax of the floating continent. This gives Shadow a reason to give a damn, because now he can no longer actually, he still can't face the reality of the situation, but Shadow's not stupid, right? Shadow is intelligent enough to realize what Kefka's trying to do, and and in his thought there's only one thing: my favorite nephew. I know some of you get that reference. In other words, he's thinking about realm. He's not thinking about the world. He's not thinking about everything else. He is thinking about realm. And in his mind, what Kefka is about to do, what Gestalt were about to do, was completely unacceptable, and he lunges in to do something about it because, damn it, that's my daughter. And so he, that actually is a significant branch point for him, going from this point in time where he cannot face his daughter towards him being willing to sacrifice his life for his daughter. Remember, if we leave Shadow behind, he dies. He doesn't like survive or have some kind of miracle. No, Shadow freaking dies if we abandon him. So he was, in other words, willing to die at this point in time, and it's only the fact that we were willing to wait for him that allowed him to survive. I'm sorry, Zed. Nothing I can do about it without spending $200, which I really don't have to burn right now. So anyways, that's awesome. That is, in fact, so awesome that instead of giving it the negative I was going to give for the story, that gets a freaking positive. Because that is a wonderful thing. And Kay mentioned something earlier. When you have a game that is very well written, it is easier to ignore plot holes because, the rest of the game is well written. When you have a game that's badly written, plot holes tend to stick out more. I've said this many, many, many times. The only difference between a good game and a bad game is a good game has more good to outweigh the bad. There is bad. We have been taking negatives away from story, from gameplay. I don't think we've actually taken any negatives away from music and sound or graphics, but we have been negativing gameplay and story. If you've been watching this whole thing, you've seen that. I have proof. I may be biased, but damn it. I am trying to explain every point in full detail so you understand. Now, yeah, I have to use Realm. You're absolutely right, Leander. I have to bring Realm to the floating continent. And by the way, I'm going to. Maybe Scorpion. This is interesting. Kind of taxing, a lot of fun. I know which game I'm doing next, though. So what we have here is a badly translated scene. There is, and this is unavoidable, when you start going into depths into, the true history of the world, if you have a bad translation, that's going to really screw up the story, and there's no avoiding that. These three statues, let's make this clear, are not the three statues, okay? Okay, we got to make that clear, because in the original English text, it acts like these are actually the three magi, but they're not. These are three statues that were made in honor of the actual original statues, the three goddesses or gods or whatever the frick you want to call them, the three magi, in other words, by the Espers who had come here and lived here a gabrillion years ago. War of the Magi or the Keyblade War, which is more devastating? That's a tough question. Because the Keyblade War, we only see a little bit of how devastating it actually was, but we do see that one planet. I forget the name of it. It's the one in Birth by Sleep, spoiler alert. And that planet is just, and I talked about this before in the Rumination, and I'll talk about it during the lore run. That place is just trashed. I mean, the level of devastation on display is colossal. That is a world that has not ever recovered from what happened there. But on the other hand, the War of the Magi did that to basically the entire setting. All of FF6 was damaged fundamentally, physically, magically, emotionally, culturally, economically by the War of the Magi. In my mind, the War of the Magi overall was more devastating. Just my take on it. Yeah, the statue. By the way, This is something most people never even caught. You can go behind these things and talk to the statues, and it shows a somewhat badly translated thing here of the story of the War of the Magi. Hey, Illyria, did you answer the 3 questions? Now I'm going to go and give what is most often considered to be the actual story of what happened. Each of the 3 Magi is designed and named after one of the different aspects of ancient religion. In other words, one of them was originally called Sephiroth. I'm not kidding, by the way. For those of you who don't know, the Sephiroth was in where the term actually comes from, not FF7. It basically has to do with one of the, I think it's the 12 manifestations of God's power, right? One of them was going to be no, Formosan. Just I was asked about 2 in specific. Oh, you're asking me a different question. I'm sorry, I totally misread that. The most destructive war in Star Wars? I'll have to think about that one. Honestly, though, if we're counting Tor, the war in Tor probably is the one. Other than that, I'd have to say in terms of raw destructiveness, that would actually be the one that Malik ran, or the one Exar Kun did. Both of those were pretty damned bad. But anyways, so yeah, these 3 statues, each of them is named after... What is that it, Fat Squeak? I'm not 100% on it, I'll be honest. But either way, each of these 3 things... statues are named after something in real-life religions that is basically the core of some aspect of religious concept. In other words, the idea they're trying to get across is these 3 goddesses were or excuse me, I shouldn't even call them goddesses. The 3 magi, that's the more accurate term, were the 3 differing perspectives on the very core concept of magic, right? So the 3 magi disagreed with each other. We don't know why. Frankly, we don't care. It doesn't actually matter. What matters is the 3 of them started to fight amongst themselves. What they did is they deliberately took humans. Some were volunteers, some were not. And they warped them, infused magic into their souls, which, by the way, is exactly how magicite works, just less invasive, and infused magic into the souls of these people, turning them into espers. Some espers looked fairly human. Some espers did not. Some espers looked like monsters. Some espers looked like carbuncle. You know, I mean, there's a variety there. But that's what the espers, how the espers came into being. The espers then fought on behalf of the magi. However, because they created so many, the espers themselves started to have their own thing going on. Some espers started fighting for people. I mean, there's a lot of people that were caught in between of this war between these 3 magi. So some of the people started learning about magicite and how to use it. Magitech Knights became a thing. Some espers joined with some humans. Some espers became anti-human. There's a lot of hints that there's actually some esper nations that existed during the War of the Magi. And I just want to stress again that if I ever make a good War of the Magi game, I'm going to play the crap out of that. And so, and then after a certain point in time, the 3 magi looked at the world and saw that, to quote, all was devastation. I mean, they just completely screwed up everything. And they agreed in a rare moment of clarity, said, okay. And they used their magical power to make a, what's usually referred to as a subplane or a demiplane. In other words, not actually another plane of existence, just one that is attached to a primary plane of existence. That's the Esperum. Went in there, dragged all the espers in, well, some of the espers in with them, and then we're like, magic therefore bled out of the world except for a few exceptions, and they left behind the massive mess that was the post-War of the Magi. Yeah, Kay, you're absolutely right on that one. So, by the way, Batquin, that's kind of what I do on my channel. I just kind of talk a lot about really digging into the lore and the gameplay and otherwise trying to really analyze and dissect games. I know it's kind of a niche market, but I love doing it, and some of my viewers seem to love watching it, so hey, you know, Oh, by the way, yeah. These shiny treasures are all mine. These will get Z-free detention, which we're going to name drop for absolutely no reason. It's being, by the way, spelled with a Z again. Hey, Squid Ball. I like that line for some reason. Well, they always said I was a slow learner, but I eat fast. Okay, so this is actually this is pretty much the hardest fight with Ultros. It's actually funny because he's got two scripts. One is the initial one, which isn't too bad. The other is the second one, which is very bad. He can hurt like crazy. He actually has access to level 3 spells in his second script, and he will crush you like a bug if you let him. So, yeah, the reason they do that, by the way, is to encourage you to use Sketch. And I want to point this out because I can't decide if this is good or bad gameplay design. So anybody who wants to chime in, feel free to give your opinion on this. But the idea here is too often you'll have a game, this happened in the day too, but this is especially common nowadays, where you have to do A. You know, you have to do a certain thing. Some modern games will literally not allow you to select a menu option that isn't what they want you to do, right? And so... And in some other cases, they will make it so that there'll be like a big text message of, hey, you're actually supposed to do this, stop what you're doing, you know, that kind of a thing. In FF6, the way they encourage you to sketch is, first of all, they have a big cutscene about him sketching, but if you decide not to, he'll just start beating the ever-living crap out of you, probably killing someone in the process, you know? And so your option is just continue to let him destroy you or sketch him. I can't decide if that's actually good game design or not, but it's certainly better game design than other varieties. So then Realm comes up, and Realm is awesome. This is probably Realm's second, I'd say, biggest character development scene in the whole game, really. How dare you! I'm Ultros! Listen, Ulti, why don't you pose for me? I'm not one of your kitty friends. Don't talk to me as if I were. I don't want a portrait. And Realm's like, okay, I don't want to draw it anymore. I'll just jump down from here. No, you can't. Zed, as I've said many, many times, there's basically 3 clouds. So I have to ask you to clarify your question. Do you mean the real Cloud, or do you mean the way he's portrayed when he is Genova Cloud? Or Fake Cloud, for that matter. Excuse me, Fake Cloud is the one that we see most of. I'm sorry, I was getting that wrong. By the way, this is a classic Japanese style thing. I don't know what it's called, but it's basically, you've got this big enemy, and this isn't just a Japanese thing. You've got this big enemy, and you've just had this big fight, and rather than actually continuing to fight them, you basically just start talking them down by being ridiculously silly and out of character for all intents and purposes, and then it's like, well, what do you want me to do? You know, this is actually also in the West, this might be referred to as the Bugs Bunny effect. You know, don't be so heartless. Ultros is like, all right. Uncle Ulti really wants you to do his portrait. Now, I'm actually worried about dying, so I'm actually not going to sit around and let him kill me, as will happen if I do. So we're just going to sketch him immediately. He will destroy me. How can this be? I'm just a stupid octopus. Ah! And he splashes into the dirt? Let's not think about that one too much. Hey, Fuke. Oh, it's still awesome. You notice the pluses have started to overlap a little bit over there. And will probably continue to do so. You know what? I agree. I think that deserves another gameplay plus. That is a wonderful way to introduce someone's special ability. In fact, it's funny because most of their special abilities aren't introduced that way. I think the only other one like that is Sabin. Sabin's special ability is introduced by a cutscene that has lore significance. Realm's ability is introduced by a cutscene that has lore significance. I'm not sure anyone else's is off the top of my head. I'm trying to think about that. You could argue that Gogo's is, I suppose, but that's not true for reasons I'll go into when we get to Gogo. Alright, so Realm is going to be one of my main mages. That means I need to get her started on stuff like Rat now. So let's get her a cure, first of all. Well, yes, that's what we're going to do. We're also going to kill this fly, because we don't like flies. Flies are bad. Okay. There we go. Fruit fly. That's why I killed it without noise. Those are easy to get. There we go. Yeah, you're right. Terra's kind of is. You're right. So I'll agree with that in a sort of fashion. Sketch can, in fact, break the game, yes, in a very severe manner. I'm sorry, Django. I don't know what RO stands for, but I get the idea based on what you're typing there. So, let's talk about Realm. Realm is a hybrid. I've talked about this before many times, but if you notice, the two hybrids in the game tend to be the strongest... good night, Formosan. Tend to be the strongest characters in the game. Terra, Red Orchestra, okay, I know what that is. Terra, who is arguably one of the strongest protagonists in the entire FF series in terms of raw power, and Realm, who in gameplay terms has the strongest stat set for magic power, and also happens to have an ability that is arguably overpowered even in lore. That is, of course, Sketch. The ability, I want to stress this, because Sketch seems like a cute thing. Most people don't use it in combat, because in order to use Sketch effectively, you need to know the enemies that are worth sketching, because not every enemy is worth sketching. But there's a lot of enemies that are worth sketching, and you can get some really destructive results from sketching as a result of knowing exactly how you're doing that, especially since the damage of the Sketch attack usually is based on Realm's own stats, which, by the way, is part of why her magic power is so through the roof. Debatable, Darth Panda Moon. Haven't decided yet. We'll see. So, Realm is a hybrid, just like Terra is. But instead of being a half-human, half-Esper, she is a half-human, half-Mage Knight, so it's a different perspective on that. It's not quite the same thing. There we go. The other thing I want to talk about Realm, though, is the way her magic manifests, in my opinion, is specifically and directly as a result of that. She is not merely a Mage Knight descendant like so many of those other people, like Strago, who can literally cast spells, right? Realm cannot cast spells, but she still has the ability to sketch a living magical recreation of an entity, which will then do whatever that entity can do, you know? And it is implied that's not really just limited to characters. She threatens multiple people with that exact same thing. That is a very unique expression of that power. And it's funny because, like I said, this isn't exactly a unique idea. Realm's ability is best described as a similarity to the Beastmaster ability back in Final Fantasy V with Capture and then Release. So that's basically the same thing. Capture and Release is effectively a longer version of Sketch. And, of course, then later on she'll get something that gives her the ability Manipulate, which allows her to specifically let the enemies, or take control of the enemies, and just have access to their menu and do things from their menu, which, in addition to making it easier to learn certain lores, also gives her access to some pretty mean attacks. It also makes perfect sense that someone like Realm, as we've already established, someone who is intelligent, sharp, precocious, etc., childlike, as we've already mentioned, would have the ability called Manipulate. The last thing I want to mention about Realm, like I said, she's definitely a C-list cast member. She does not get a lot of characterization. Basically, this whole section, she has some stuff, and then she has a little bit of stuff in G-Door, and a little bit of stuff during the Hidden Quest, and that's kind of it. But one of the things we do learn from all of that is that she is kind of the kind of person who, if this adventure, if FF6 had happened, 10 years later, she would probably be the main character with the level of intellect and perception and cunning and natural magical prowess that she has, she would be just unstoppable. It is almost a shame that magic flees the world and she is reduced to only being a normal child. I mean, that's going to be terrible. Now, as Leander points out, and I was going to point this out as well to compare and contrast her, Celis, Terra, and hey Shadow, Celis, Terra, and Realm actually are three reflections of the same concept. And you could argue Kefka's in there too, but we don't want to get that into that because that's not relevant. The point is Celis is a young woman, I guess the gender doesn't matter, a young person whose youth was taken from her, removed from her life, and she was artificially imbued with power, magical power. And so she became this precise, disciplined, cold-hearted woman who, and I've talked about Celis a lot. I mean, I'm not even scratching the surface of her character right now. But you get the point. She's the colder half of the yin to Terra's yang. Terra had her life, her youth, taken from her, but she had natural, innate magical prowess thanks to her hybrid nature. The innate ability to learn magic. Celis and Terra actually are the only characters in the game who don't need Magicite to learn spells that don't involve lore. And of course they have their own things like their... Terra naturally learns Ultima though, whereas Celis does not, which I think really settles a certain debate that I'm not to go into right now. So Celis... Terra had her life, her youth stolen from her again, and therefore was used as kind of a biological weapon rather than an engineered weapon, right? The Heartless to Celis's nobody, if you will. But then we have Realm. Realm's interesting because Realm has innate magical power, just like Terra, and the discipline and learning necessary to learn how to use it, thanks to where she'd grow up. That's kind of like Celis. But the biggest difference between Realm, and Leander already pointed this out, is Realm had a childhood. Realm had a loving family, well, a loving adoptive grandfather in Strago. She possibly had a mother. We know very, very, very little about Realm's mother. It is very likely Realm's mother is no longer alive as of now. We don't know how long that's been true. However, she did have a loving environment and other people like her. Remember how Celis and Terra both kind of connected to each other as a result of the fact that they... Well, excuse me, I should say Celis connected to Terra as a result of the fact that Terra was the only one like Celis. Realm had a whole village of people like her, of people who could use spells and cast magic and all that fun stuff. I cannot overemphasize what a difference it makes to have a good, loving, supportive growth environment when you were a child. I cannot overemphasize the significance of that. That's a good question, Pandemonium. Personally, I think the people of Terra from FF9 are more disgusting in their elitist, just self-interested garbage. But Gestal is probably overall more evil because there is an active level of selfish malevolence in his actions as opposed to the people of Terra who just didn't give a damn. The people of Terra are probably one of the biggest applications of the apathy form of evil that I talked about earlier in fiction. I mean, those guys can go screw themselves. Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of all I got with regards to Realm. Sorry, I don't have much else to say about her. So. Espers. Boom, 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 boom. Now, the Espers, it's mentioned several times, the Espers, it's not that they lose control of their powers in the material realm, it's that magic works differently here, and that makes sense. The demi-plane was specifically made for them out of magic by the Magi, okay? Ergo, magic functioning differently there makes actually a lot of sense. In fact, it's one of the reasons I feel that the Espers were not able to put up enough of a fight against the Imperial soldiers when the Imperial soldiers showed up 16 years ago. Is because of the fact that they're not really that geared for combat, in addition to the fact that they probably didn't really have a concept or idea of how to defend themselves against an armed force. Anyways, so the the Espers, when they got out, they basically lost a degree of control of their power, but it's not that they lost control, it's just that the Esper power works differently here. And I would say is overall stronger and more, for lack of a better term, wild. In other words, uncontrolled in the material plane, right? Ergo, the idea here being that when they got out, they were just and had no idea how to deal with anything. But after a period of time, they could learn to pare themselves down, control themselves to the point where they don't just, I don't know, to use an example at random, butcher an entire city of people without really meaning to. Now, this is also relevant because what's about to happen in one of this. By the way, this is the longest cutscene in the game. Starting now, this is like a 6-minute cutscene. I kid you not. Even if you're mashing through the text, this is the biggest cutscene in the entire game. Even unless you count the ending, which I don't. What's going to happen soon-ish? I got a lot of talking to do, so I'm going to kind of hesitate here for a moment. Is that a lot of Espers are going to come flying out, and again, don't have that full control over their powers. And I personally believe that's actually one of the reasons why, shut up Deutsch, one of the reasons why Kefka has such an easy time completely curb-stomping the Espers that come out. Because they may have that wild, powerful magic, but they have no idea how to use it properly. Not in here, not in the material plane. Whereas Kefka, well, he's been eating up Magicite left and right. He's already perfected this whole method of forcing an Esper into Magicite, and will do it left and right, and take a whole bunch of new Magicites. It's like 12 total new chunks of Magicite, just for himself. Because Kefka. Now, I want to mention one other thing here before we really keep going. This is the fake ending of the game. I've mentioned this before. This is actually classic writing, but I think I'm actually one of the only people I know, me and like 2 of my friends, were a few of the people who were actually fooled by the idea that this was actually going to be the end of the game. Now, to defend myself a little bit, most other games I played up to this point weren't actually all that long, and if you look at the arcs of this, this is a complete story arc. If the game had actually ended here, there would be very few loose threads left dangling. There would actually be only 2 that I could think of. One is Kefka and one is Gestal. That's it. Everything else would be nicely wrapped up, and they would be able to do a nice epilogue, or excuse me, a nice finale, ending, and epilogue, right? But here's the catch. This fake ending is exactly, in my opinion, one of the reasons FF6 is so damned good. Because if the game had ended at this point in time, if the game had ended after this fake ending, after the big cutscene that ends in Thamasa, this would be a great game. But then they completely take this situation, which has gotten nothing but better and better and better. Understanding has been reached. Reasonable discourse has been reached. People have finally started discussing and interacting with one with another. Blah blah blah. Everything has finally started to resolve, and then it goes from bad to worse to worse to worse. And from the moment Kefka shows up, the game doesn't stop getting even worse, all the way up to and including when Cid dies. Think about that for a moment. It literally, each step, each next thing that happens. Okay, Kefka shows up, and then, Leo gets killed, and then he takes all the Espers, and then he goes to get the statues, and then the floating continent comes up, and then the freaking world is destroyed. And then we see what's happening after, in the world after, in the world of ruin, which is called that so adequately and appropriately. The world of ruin. It never stops getting bad. That is the low point of the entire game. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. I just wanted to talk about it here a little bit because it's awesome. I think this whole cutscene, in a nutshell, does get absolutely does get a plus to the story. Even ignoring the fake out, which I just mentioned, this is some great storytelling right here. This is some good writing for the reasons I just mentioned. They take a classic, uplifting, and then punch you in the gut, and then they don't stop punching you in the gut for several more minutes. Or hours, depending on how you play. So this is when they explain some of the things I've already talked about. Them losing their powers here, the difficulty of functioning, slaughtering all the people in Vector, you know, the fact that they were at the gate trying to discuss what to do. You know, I've already mentioned this thing. This is probably a good moment. I agree with Kafka, by the way, Shadow. This is probably a good moment to mention something that I've always had a personal theory of. I think time functions a little bit differently in the Esper realm. I don't have a lot of reasoning to give to that, other than the fact that it kind of makes sense in my head. That's really the only reason I have to give to that. That this magical realm that was created specifically to house these people, that time just passes a little bit differently there, that it's distorted. Make sense? Um, and so, for example, you know, for us it's been a bajillion years, but for them it's just kind of been, you know, maybe a year or two or 8 or 20 or whatever. And that would also explain a couple of other little strange inconsistencies, like the fact that their friends have been kidnapped for 16 years, and only now they're trying to go out and do something about it. It's just a couple little things like that. So this is a great scene, and they deliberately go out of their way to play this song. You're paying attention, right? This gets a music plus. This gets a music plus. Absolutely. This is so brilliant. Oops, that's the wrong one. Okay, I'm gonna explain myself here. You ready for this? I'm gonna explain this stuff. Oof. Okay, so you guys, we were just in Thamasa. Anybody who's played this game, you know that Thamasa has its own theme music, specifically for Thamasa. It's actually Strago's theme, but whatever. This is standard town music. Rather than doing Thamasa's theme, they go out of the way to have the standard town music here. Why? So that you have that peaceful, wonderful, everything's okay again thing. Remember, the towns at the beginning of the game had this music playing for them, and then after a certain point in time, it kind of stopped being true, and we started hearing other town musics like Zozo's or like the oppressed, or not the oppressed, but the under siege towns like South Figaro and stuff like that. And so. And Thamasa had its own theme, so we get Vector had its own incredibly depressing theme. So we get here, and all of a sudden, it's like it's like we've come full circle. They're trying to trick you into thinking that we have come full circle, thematically speaking, and so everything is all nice. Exactly, Samurai. So it's all familiar. So it's all comfortable and cozy, and we've done it, and we're all the way back to shut up, Evil Knights. We're all the way back to Ground Zero. And it's like yes. And General Leo is talking to Yura. And by the way, there's some talk that Yura was actually supposed to be fleshed out as a character a lot more than he is. I don't know if that's true or not. I have seen several fanfics that have gone out of their way to give like a whole backstory to Yura. Shrug. Leo, of course, being the perfect diplomat for this situation. The two of them start talking. The implication here is that Leo and Yura are still talking while Locke and Celis are off to the side. Let's return to Vector. Celis and Locke want to talk, but that's just kind of unresolved because they're still trying to figure out their emotions. Realm makes a complaint. Strago laughs about it. Now, I want you to watch Locke. A lot of people miss this. A lot of people miss what's about to happen because it goes by so quickly. Watch Locke, okay? You watching? So he looks around. There's going to be like the shock moment, and then they laugh, and then Locke waves to the camera. And then it all goes to hell. Just goes completely to hell. In keeping with the tone, Kefka gets knocked over by his own Magitech Knights. But he doesn't care. Why would he give a damn? At this point, this is Kefka when he is damned powerful. By the way, nice little touch. They make the Magitech Knights here have a slightly different color, specifically to emphasize that these are elite knights. Notice his first target is the Imperial soldiers, by the way. No one else. Imperial soldiers. Behold, a Magicite Motherlode. And the first one he kills is Yura. Really wish they'd fleshed Yura out a bit more, so that would have had a little more impact. And there goes the Ice Dragon. Or maybe that's the Water Dragon, I don't know. I like the futile attempt to get away, by the way. Nice little touch. From now on, the name of this game is going to be Despair. So the first thing he does is he orders his troops to burn Thamos to the ground because, well, I don't think I have to explain why. Really, I don't. Leo is like, no! Now, this is a little funny. So we get to play as Leo for basically the only part in the entire game. Right here, we can set him in the front. We can check his equipment. He has the crystal sword equipped, which we can actually get much later. He's got the offering, the Atlas armlet, some decent armor, not the greatest. No relics. Kefka is here. And I really wish, again, in full 3D Awesome, I have a very strong impression that if this scene was being if this scene was being done in a full proper remake 3D Awesome, we would actually see these soldiers actively burning the town as we're here. Fun fact, you can't actually flee, so yeah, it's Guardian. It's frickin' Guardian. They won't let you leave the town. So we're just gonna run away. Run away from the giant mecha. Town's being burned to death. Everything's going to hell. Leo goes to the inn. He's like, I'm kind of tired. We'll deal with Kefka tomorrow. I would pay so much money. I really would. If, like, picture the remake. Just picture it, okay? Town's being burned. Everything's being attacked. You have control of Leo, right? And you try to escape, and you can't get out because there's these massive Magitech machines in your way, and you can't go anywhere, and Kefka's just over there laughing, non-stop laughing, as the entire town is being destroyed, and you go into the inn, and you kind of lay down, and the camera fades, and in the distance, like muted, you can still hear the town being destroyed as Leo's sleeping. I would pay money just for that one scene, that one little humorous detail to be added into the remake. Because, damn it. But anyways, enough silliness. It's time to get to tragedy. So, how strong is Kefka? Well, he's pretty strong, but I want to point something else about Leo. You see this? You see that? Leo is not a Magitech knight. Leo does not have Magicite. Leo's just a guy who can do that. He is simply that skilled, that strong, that effectively superhuman of a soldier. Kind of like Sabin, actually, to use another equivalent, or Mog, I guess would be another equivalent, or Gao. But the point is, Leo is effectively superhuman by virtue of training and skill. It's another reason I like him as a character. It kicks you back regardless, Samurai, with a revived Guardian. That's a good question, Fuke, and a very difficult one. In my honest perspective, I don't think he would. I think at this point in time, Kefka had finally surpassed Leo, and I think that's the point. If I can explain myself for a moment. Kefka has always been in Leo's shadow. Even though Kefka was the first Magitech Knight, even though Kefka had the ear of the Emperor himself, even though Kefka could make all those soldiers grovel and prostrate themselves at his feet, he was always going to be in the shadow of General Leo. General Leo was stronger, well-respected, smarter, basically better in every way. I've always felt that there was at least some degree of rivalry between the two. Obviously, Leo can't stand Kefka, but what I mean by that is Kefka was always trying to surpass Leo. And it's beautifully perfect because it gets to this point where Kefka has officially taken so much Magicite and gained so much magical power that he can finally overwhelm and defeat Leo. And in the ultimate beautiful irony of that, he doesn't do that at first. Why would he? Why would he? I disagree with that completely, Darth Pandemonium. I cannot begin to disagree with that as much. So Kefka doesn't just kill Leo. He breaks him first. He does this right here. This is so Kefka, because he's not actually interested in breaking Leo. He's interested in messing with him because it's funny. because it's funny to Kefka that someone like Leo, with all his morals and all his ethics and all his standard soldier officer superiority, could be brought so low by something so simple and stupid as a man he respects telling him what to do. And that idea is ridiculous and pointless and stupid from Kefka's perspective. Kefka looks at that and thinks, God, Leo, you are such an idiot. How could you ever possibly actually be like this? You are a moron just like everyone else in this entire planet. And I can prove it to you, and he does. This is what Kefka's doing here. He's not breaking Leo. Well, okay, he is breaking Leo, but that's not the intent. What he is doing is proving either to Kefka himself or to Leo or just the world and as a whole that Leo is just another moron just like anyone else. And that Leo does not deserve any of the respect or any of the honors or any of the dignity that is bestowed upon him. That he's just another stupid little speck. And how does Kefka kill Leo? With a knife. Nothing more, nothing less. All he does is stab him in the back, because Leo does not deserve to be killed with all the power Kefka has finally has at his back. Fling. At this point, he is nothing more than a pile of garbage. Now, some people have asked why it is that the Espers, who were clamoring up at the gate, decided now was the time to break through and come out. I have my own theory on that, and that theory is simple. I imagine the other Espers came to the gate and noticed that their friends were gone, and were like, what the hell? Where'd all our friends go? And then they felt them die. They felt Kefka kill them, and that enraged them. That made them so furious that they had to push themselves through the barrier, breaking through the doors, breaking through the rocks, and just storming out in order to go and get revenge right now. Fenrir, by the way. Shiva, again. Kirin. Bismarck. Didn't catch that one. Phantom. So then the Espers fly up there. This is a cool scene, by the way. I mean, this whole section is a cool scene. This is just freaking fantastic. I'm tempted to give it another plus just because of how awesome and long and awesome this scene is. Notice how they just zoom in on Themassa, by the way, as soon as they get their bearings. And then Kefka, well, he doesn't give a damn about any of this at this point. He's just killed Leo. He has finally proved that the great leader of the Empire is a joke. So, you know what? These elite, amazing Magitek armors I've brought with me, why don't we just go ahead and kill them? It's okay. He's not doing it on purpose. Those Magitek Knights, those guys are dead as a side consequence of what he's actually doing. Basically, magically nullifying the Espers, which also happened to destroy them while he was at it. And so there's one Esper dead. There's another one dead. Anyone watched Babylon 5? I know some of you haven't, and this is going to sound sort of spoilery, but I'm just going to mention a character who has a scene where he takes out a knife and slices it along his hand, and he holds it up, and a little drop of blood comes off. Drop, drop, drop. And each time a drop comes out, he says, dead, 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 dead. It's a pretty brutal scene. I don't want to spoil the reasoning for those of you who haven't seen that show yet, but that's what I think of when I see this. Kefka just killing Esper after Esper, and it's just dead, dead, dead. And they can't do anything to him at this point. Kefka is so strong at this point. And I talked about this already, but I'm going to repeat it because this is so important. This is when Kefka really loses it. I know, you're like, what? Oh, hasn't he already lost it? No, he hasn't. Now is when Kefka finally snaps. The great and powerful Espers, The amazing creatures of ancient lore who have magic and can manipulate reality to their whim are no better than anyone else. They are so pathetic and so small. Even with all that power, even with all that magic, they're just pathetic little specks, just like everything else. And the rest of them, if even in the world where like the greatest things in the world can be considered so small and so irrelevant, what the hell's the point of anything? If you have already if you imagine for yourself, you crawl to the top, rip yourself to the very top of this ladder, and at the top of the ladder you find out there's nothing there. It's nothing worth a damn. You have gone all this way trying to find some frickin' point of meaning, some reason to exist, thinking maybe, just maybe, there might be something up there that might actually make you feel, that might actually make some significance or purpose in continued existence. And you finally get there, and what you find is garbage, just like everything below. This is when Kefka snaps. This is when he just says, screw it. Screw everything. That is an interpretation I've heard many times, Fuke. But obviously, I should preface everything I've been saying. This is my opinion and perspective on the matter. I've heard several interpretations of Kefka. That definitely deserves another story plus, by the way. That's just, God, this scene. Every time I hit this scene, I was just so overwhelmed and looking forward to it and just, damn. That's right, Leander. That is absolutely right. We did that. This may be a linear story, but a lot of it happens because of the actions of the player. Now, this, like I said, from now until a certain point of the game, basically from now until we get the Falcon, this game, the name of this game is Despair, the absence of hope. We have lost Leo. We have lost a decent chunk of Thamasa. Kefka's off going to do God knows what. We're stranded out here in the middle of nowhere. We don't have an airship. We don't have a ship. We have nothing. What we have is front row tickets to the end of the world. I like that, Pandemonium. I like that quote a lot. Oh, and by the way, the rest of our friends are off in Imperial territory doing God knows what. Now, this is what we call a hope spot. I could be using the wrong term there. A hope spot is a tiny little flicker of hope to make you think, oh, things aren't that bad, only to be immediately quashed by even more despair. In other words, you feel the despair more strongly if you have hope before it. I know that sounds cynical and horrible, but it's true. There's nothing worse than looking up and thinking, oh, things might not be as bad as I thought. Things might not be horrible. And then, no, things are actually just as horrible as you were afraid of. That is one of the most soul-crushing experiences I am ever aware of existing. By the way, this is kind of cute. I got the gal who brought us tea. After all, she just blurted out the whole crooked plan. In the original translation and the GBA translation, it's a lot more clear. That happened while they were having sex. or while after they had sex. They were in bed together, basically. And I only mention that because it amuses me that the one time Edgar finally lucks out on a woman, it actually leads to them basically saving their lives and the lives of their friends. And yeah, the flicker of hope. Excuse me. And yeah, I agree with what Baronessa just said. Kefka has not fully unleashed. Not yet. Kefka has reached the top of the ladder and found it wanting. To quote Dragon Age, poorly, we entered the realm of the gods and found the throne empty. Oh, realm of the maker, excuse me, it's not gods, it's plural. It's singular. We entered the realm of the maker and we found the throne empty. So, Kefka has basically at this point passed the despair event horizon, but there is one thing keeping him hinged. Just one thing. Also, this is a cute scene. Realm threatening to sketch Sabin's thing. Thank you, lamppost. I knew there was a quote pretty close to that. I just couldn't remember actually what it was called, how it actually went. I've seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty. Okay. Get a quick save in here. So, we have our hope spot. We've got the airship back. Thank God! Well, now everything's going to get a lot worse. So here's Kefka and Gestal. Note there are no Imperial soldiers here. I mean, we do know the Empire still exists as an entity at this point in time, but it's also worth noting, and something that isn't actually emphasized too much, is the Empire is a broken shell at this point. The Empire really was devastated by the Esper attack. So what we are about to fight would be best described as the Imperial Remnant. Once we wipe them out, well, let's just say that it's very logical that there is no Empire left in the world of Ruin. Although I have another thought about that, which I will share in a moment. So, what is about to ensue has been called the greatest cutscene in gaming history. I'm not kidding, I've heard it called that. Even on the SNES, even with the limitations of the graphics and the time, they managed to get across the significance of what is about to happen here. And they do a really good job of this. Look at this. Just look at this. I cannot wait to see this in full 3D awesome. The continent literally ripping itself free from the world, leaving the gaping hole in the ocean as the water pours in. The ground itself mutating and warping as it falls into the sky as the magic is distorting it and twisting it. Oh, by the way, what happened to all the espers that were on the other side? See you around, Marley. Now, I've heard several theories about what actually happened to the espers that were in the other side that they just went through and got. I've given you guys two of my own theories on the matter. Feel free to share or argue or tell me I'm stupid. No, it's a slightly different. That's a song called Catastrophe. Yeah, exactly, Samurai. Although, let's be honest, there's actually one other scene that they would have to do as well, and you know the one I'm talking about. Okay, so I need Celis. Hang on, I gotta build my party really quick here. We're gonna do this right here. The first theory is that all of those horrible, disgusting creatures we're fighting on the floating continent are basically what's left of the espers. I do too, Samurai. In fact, I accidentally did so a minute ago, and then I realized my mistake and was like, oh, whoops. But getting back to my point, hang on a second. I actually don't know. This is actually kind of a weak party because I haven't been really labeling my magic. Anyways, but the other theory I've heard is that the espers are exactly what you're imagining. They're gone. They're eaten. They're magicite. Remember, Gestal casts Flare and Murton in an upcoming scene. Where do you think he learned how to do that? Where do you think he learned how to cast such incredibly powerful spells personally? No Magitech infusion. Yeah, I think it's pretty damned obvious what exactly happened to the rest of those espers. I have played many different mods of old games, Fuke. Some of them I don't actually care for. Some of them I do. I actually was working on one of my own, actually. And actually kind of ended up giving up on it halfway through because it was just taking a ridiculous amount of time. It was for FF6, of course. Basically, I was rewriting the entire story to tell an entirely new story that I'd come up with on the fly within the confines of FF6. Like, in other words, if all I did, the goal was to only alter dialogue and see if I could tell a totally different story with the same characters and same cutscenes and whatnot. And I was actually doing pretty good job of it. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. It just never actually went anywhere. Actually, no, I don't want that. I know exactly what I need to do. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'll do. So why don't we go ahead and do that, and you'll go ahead and get that, and we'll give you, that. I'm going to do a little bit of leveling here because I'm kind of scared of the floating continent right now. I am not in a good position to take the floating continent as of this point in time, to be completely blunt, so I need to have some magic at my back. So that's exactly what we're going to do, and Edgar is going to carry me to victory because he's frickin' Edgar, and that's what he does. He carries me to victory. I'm dead serious. Edgar is just the man. Actually, I want you here. For those of you who don't know, you have to have a three-party party in order to hit the continent, so I'm kind of... I always come up with, especially when I'm doing a speedrun, I always come up with a pretty specific strat to deal with that particular, for lack of a better term, problem as I'm going up there. Let's do this. Yes, I have Pandemonium. Also, I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say that it makes sense that that isn't Zigbar. That's all I'm going to say about that. Hey, Madman. What's up, dude? Running shoes, and actually... there we go. Yeah. Hero ring. There we go. I suck, apparently, Kay. Although, actually, I do have a lore answer for your question, even though you weren't asking for one. Like Samurai said, imagine how many espers he just ate in order to learn those spells so quickly. I mean, think about that for a moment. Interesting, Shadow. I'm not entirely sure I agree, because I really like the this is the last dungeon feel that the floating continent really has. And let's be honest with ourselves, even though most of us probably were not taken in by the fake ending in Thamasa, a lot of us were taken in by the fake ending of the floating continent. It really feels like a last dungeon. It is the floating continent, which used to be the Esper realm, containing the 3 Magi statues with the Emperor Gestalt at its head. Everything about it just screams this is the last dungeon. It's even got a unique song, unique tile set, too. Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of us, myself included, were like, yeah, this is definitely going to be the last dungeon, and oh god, this is going to be epic and awesome. And everything there hurts like hell, too. All the enemies there are way stronger than anything else in the entire game up to this point, and are actually stronger than many of the enemies in the World of Ruin. It'll take a while in the World of Ruin to equal out how strong the floating continent stuff was. For the record, I still don't think Season 3 has ended. If I was doing this as a TV show, I know exactly where I'd end Season 3, and some of you are probably going to disagree with me on this, but we'll get there, It's obviously coming up. Because, I mean, shoot, dude. You know? Yeah, that's also true, Leander. Again, we are fully explorative. We have the airship again. So we have the freedom point again. We can go anywhere in the entire game. again. There's even optional stuff we could go do right now, like going getting Mog. We could do right now. We could go get the dances right now. We could get those extra espers. We can go level up. We can go find. We even have like an optional guy in Tangier, up on the the island that'll eventually be Gogo's island up there. You know, etc. etc. Oh, absolutely, Fuke, but I'm not good enough for the continent yet. I need to get some basic spells on these characters, because basically this is a magic-heavy party, and they don't know any magic. And I know exactly what it's like to go to the floating continent and be unprepared. It's bad. That would be awesome, Samurai. If I could have 5 characters out of all the FF series, who would I choose? In no particular order. Terra, Celis, Sabin, or not Sabin, excuse me, Cecil, Rydia, Galuf, and I hate to restrict myself to basically 3 games, but you said only 5, so there you go. Bamf. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be grinding a little bit here. Yes, right now we're doing filler episodes as we grind up a couple of things. What you're doing doesn't matter. I think I've said this before. I like to do patterns in the forest as I level in them. Basically, every time you hit a corner, you have to turn in the direction of that corner. If you hit a wall, you have to bounce back. Yeah, exactly, Shadow. God, the floating continent has destroyed me so many times I've played this game. I actually lost a speedrun once upon a time. This was a while ago, back before I was streaming at all. I mean, like back in the 90s. But I actually lost a speedrun once as I was racing alongside one of my friends. I think that was Vincent, actually. Because I died so horribly on the floating continent, and I just couldn't recover from it. I could not recover from the floating continent. And he had actually bothered to pause and level before he went up there. And then, you know, that he just kind of overtook me, and I could never actually recover from that devastating loss, because I couldn't kill anything on the floating continent. It was just crushing me like a bug, over and over and over. I mean, hell, I am actually so weak right now, I need Edgar to carry me to victory. That's how bad my party setup is right now. But then again, I am hyper-specializing. Setzer and Celis are learning very specific spells to be able to deal with certain combat that's coming up. And Realm is the one who's trying to learn spells in general to become just a general mage for the upcoming section. That's kind of my goal right now. Yeah, Fuke. I was doing a speedrun, well, I guess 90s is basically as early as it was. I mean, hell, I used to race Mega Man games, you know, the original NES ones, alongside a friend. Just get a second TV set up and you just sit down and you both start racing, you know. I know speedrunning is kind of a modern phenomenon. I think it's great that speedrunning has become such a thing, but I mean, speedruns have been around since forever. It's just we didn't actually organize about it back then. We just played with friends. No, I do not, Safis. I cannot see anything that an achievement system would add to FF6, personally. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. If they do it, sure. However, I am saying I'm opposed to it because anytime you spend development time on... anytime you do development time on a feature, that takes away from development time and everything else. Time is a finite resource, right? So if they actually spent development time on making an achievement system for Final Fantasy VI, I think that'd probably be a bad thing because you've wasted time. You could have done, you know, polishing the rest of the game, making a freaking achievement system for Final Fantasy VI. It's not like you need an achievement system, for God's sakes. It's FF6. Just enjoy it, damn it. It's not that hard. What do you think? And I received silence and I just went, hang on, guys. All right, guys, we're gonna go get dinner soon. Do you guys think we should go get? Here, we'll do a poll. We'll do a poll while I level a little bit. Poll open. Chinese. Type 1 for Chinese. Type 2 for barbecue. There you go. Vote it up, guys. I'm going to be taking a break as soon as that poll's done. We'll go ahead and that's actually okay. I was planning to do that anyways because I want to do the floating continent, the finale, the awesome. I want to talk about all that wonderful, amazing stuff in one go. So one way or another, I was going to pause here. So just a heads up. Oh, good. About time. Yay! By the way, FF6 Remake is not an official thing yet. Emphasis on the yet. It is more likely now that there will be an FF6 proper remake than it has been since they were doing the old remakes. I hate to point this out for those of you who do not know this, and I hate to point this out because it makes me cry a little bit inside, but for those of you not aware, back when they were doing the proper remakes of 1, 2, 3, 4, and they stopped, there was an intention to keep going. They were going to keep going. The same team that it did in 3 and 4 was going to do 5, and then they were going to do 6, and then they were going to do 7. That was all in the works. And then they canceled it, and to this day, I don't know why. I have never in the... God, it's been like 10 years. I have never figured out why they stopped. I still don't know. In fact, that specific thing, that specific reason is why I started the phrase squirrels for brains. Because it was the only thing that made sense, that they were just squirrels rattling around in their skulls instead of their brains. Because I don't know why the hell they would do that. Because they're stupid. There you go, there's your answer. Alright, I'm going to do like 3 more fights and then we'll cut off the poll. Where are we at on Maduin? Or Maduin, or however the hell you want to say his name. I don't actually care. Yeah, the management, that's the thing. There are still talented developers at Square. There are still talented developers at frickin' Konami. You know, just to go to the extreme example there. But the management, the corporate side of things, they can go screw themselves. So yeah, 2 more fights. I really hope FF15 does do well. Make no mistake, I am hopeful that it's a good game. I really am. I don't think it is, to be blunt. I have not been enthused by what I've seen, but I really do hope it's good. Yes, Illyria, several of the art assets and pre-work that had already been done for some of the work ended up being turned around into Bravely Default. That is correct. I don't know what. I don't know if it's art assets. I don't know if it's some of the code they did. But all I'm going to say is Bravely Default has a subpar story. It does. I'm sorry. But as far as a pure JRPG combat and gameplay, it's one of the best I've ever seen in my life. The ability to, I mean, I can't even go into words about how incredible the convenience features and the customization features of Bravely Default are from a purely gameplay perspective. Purely gameplay perspective. I mean, just wow, you know? Imagine, but tying this in, imagine FF5, proper remake, with Bravely Default's system. With the, you know, the ability to set up the encounters the way you want to, and the ability to do the equipment the way you want to, and the way to set up the job system the way you want to, and just all the dozens of different features that I don't feel like sitting down and listing right now that Bravely Default has. Maduin? Yeah, that's what I said, Brother Mox. Oh, he's already done with that, so let's get him. Yeah, tell me about Illyria. God, I would have bought that for $100 freaking dollars. Not even kidding. Just, yes, here, take my money. God, here, just take it, please. Just take it. God, I'm begging you. Okay, I don't think Riley would have turned into a Heartless, but Elsa? Absolutely. Or, to be a little more accurate, I think Elsa would have turned into a nobody. And whatever her Heartless became would have been the boss of the level. And that would have been fun. Maduin! It will always be Maduin. Oh, Maduin? Is that how you're saying it then? Maduin?